Hello and welcome to my vlog. Today we're going to talk about why doesn't God just show himself to us so no one has any doubts about the spirit realm and all that it entails. There is a very good reason, and we are told why. Let's begin. If there is a God, why doesn't God manifest a great demonstration of divine power and close forever any doubt of the existence of a supreme intelligence, a first creator? How could people be allowed to blindly ignore their spirituality and pursue temporary material happiness when the cost is lost time and misery in many lives? The rewards of heaven are so obvious. Why prolong the suffering of those in ignorance? This was a lingering doubt of a high spirit from the 10th level of heaven. This high spirit, who was sent on a mission with his group, had stopped on the 5th level of heaven. While there, he took a rest to meditate. He laid upon a field of small red flowers, surrounded by trees and the sounds of nature. During that blissful moment, he wasn't thinking about why evil was even permitted to exist by God, whereupon a man sat beside him. His mantle was of rich purple, and underneath he wore a tunic of gossamer, through which his flesh shone like sunlight reflected from the heart of a crystal. His shoulder jewel was of deep green, and the one upon his forehead was of green and violet. His hair was brown, but his eyes were of no color of which you know. So he sat there looking before him, and I looking upon him, and his great loveliness for a long time, and then he said, "My brother, this seat is a very cozy one, and pleasant to rest upon, think you?" And I replied, "Yes, my lord," for I had no more words than those. "And yet," he said, "it is a bed of flowers on which you set your mind to lie upon." And to that I could not give any answer, so he continued, "Think you, friend, that these little red beauties of the flower family, which are filled with budding life and comeliness, such as little children have, were made for such purpose as this to which we put them?" And all I could reply was, "I have not thought of it, sir." "No, that is after the manner of most of us, and it is strange, too, seeing that we be every one of us offspring of the one who is thinking all the time, and who does not that is not in agreement with reason, and it is within the ocean of the life of him we swim from age to age, and never out of it. It is strange how we can act unthinkingly, who are children of such a Father as he." The high spirit, ashamed at crushing the glorious flowers, got up and started to walk with the Lord who had sat next to him. The high spirit was part of the group that used the spirit Kathleen to communicate with Reverend G. Bao Owen, who wrote of this account in Book 3, The Ministry of Heaven, in 1917. The high spirit told the Lord who had sat next to him, "This is my favorite walk," I told him. "It is hither I often come to think out matters which perplex me." "Yes," he said thoughtfully, "this is a sphere of perplexity beyond its fellows, and, coming hither, you often sit down upon some bank and think things out. Or do you rather think yourself deeper into your perplexity, I wonder? But let that rest a while. Where sat you last where you came hither to think?" He stood still to ask the question, and I pointed to the bank before him, and I said, "It was here I sat when I came hereabouts last time." "And that but recently?" he asked, and I said, "Yes." "And yet," he said, "I see no mark of your body's shape upon this moss or its blossoms. They have very soon recovered themselves of any untoward pressure they received." "But," he continued, "yet this is the concern of the All-Creator, equal in value and appraised with the bruising of the souls of men. For whatever work is his indeed, and his alone." The high spirit was deliberately shown that the red flowers fully restored. They had been crushed under his weight, but now had no outward sign to mark them as once almost destroyed. The Lord wished to impress that the blistering furnace of suffering, after a time, leaves little or no outward mark upon us. After throwing out that little nugget, the Lord embarked on the next step to enlightenment. The Lord led the high spirit to a hill in order for him to experience a vision, which would expel his doubts about God's method of progress for spirits. The vision unfolded. At length there arose in the midst of the dome the figure of a man, who ascended until he stood upon the top of it. It was the figure of Christ, clothed all in white. The garment he wore came from his shoulders to his feet, but did not hide them, and as he stood there, a rosy hue began to flood his garment, and this deepened in tone until, at length, he stood there enrobed in deep rich crimson, and upon his brow a circlet of rubies too. And when he held his hand stretched outward, I saw that on the back of each one great red stone sparkled, and I knew what the vision meant to me. He had been lovely in his whiteness, but now he shone with crimson loveliness and rich deep beauty, which made me gasp for ecstasy as I looked upon him. The High Spirit realized that Christ came to earth as a pure white light of love and blessings. But for the true message to sink deep into the hearts of the believers, suffering had to sear, like a red-hot glowing knife that had laid in the fire to close an open wound, the goodness in, so it could never be removed. Then he saw Christ's effect upon his flock. Out upon the plain below we saw the people thronging to get a sight of this glory, and upon their faces and their robes there shone the light projected from his body, and it seemed to breathe some call to sacrifice and service, which needed trust to undertake it, inasmuch as those who should offer themselves for work must go forth and suffer, yet without knowing quite all the mystery of suffering. Then, as if it was the first time, the High Spirit looked upon the Lord beside him, and he saw the inner suffering and the faint lines that revealed themselves in the Lord's face, which did not detract from his handsomeness, but made him glow with love all the more. Then the High Spirit told us what was said next. But I could not speak to him, and so stood by in silence. And then he said, "My brother, I have come from a place much brighter than this sphere of yours to bring you hither, that you should see the man of sorrows in his glory. Those sorrows he came forth freely to gather to himself and make them his own. Without them he would lack some loveliness which is his today. And those sorrows which give to him so much of gentleness are they which, in their crude and undeveloped state, flood earth with pain and the hells in torment. These are but for the moment for each who passes beneath their shadow. We cannot penetrate, my brother, into all the great heart of God, but we can, as we even now have done, get at times a glimpse of the reason shining through it all, and then perplexity loses some of its more sinister aspects, and the hope arises that some day we may be able the better to understand. But till that day dawns for me, I am content to know that he who came forth of the Father's heart came white and pure, and with steadfast purpose, faced the task ahead, where his path lay amidst the turgid clouds of sin and hatred, which gathered about the planet of earth. Nay, into the very hells he went, and sought out those who suffered there, and because of their anguish he suffered also. So the man of sorrows returned to the steps of his Father's throne, his task accomplished. But not as he gone forth did he return. He went forth white in purity of holiness. He came back again, the crimson warrior, prince and conqueror. But the blood he shed was not that of another, but only his own. Strange warfare this, and new in the world's stranger history, that the warrior meeting his foe should turn the blade toward his own breast, and yet come forth conqueror by reason of his blood he shed. Hence we must all find our own path to purity. For some it entails ages of suffering, and for others only the vision of love itself serves as the catalyst. God, in his effort to promote free will in all cases, has provided multiple paths to the same destination. There is no one road, there is no one direction, and there is no set time, only freedom to explore. It is up to us to set the pace, to determine how close we should hold the lessons learned, and move beyond our pettiness into the world of light and love. If you are interested more in how the spirit world guides us, please read my book, How We Are Guided by Spirits, Book 3 of Spiritism. Book 3 illustrates the ground game of the spirit world via the messages of multiple spirits to the Reverend G. Val Owen. We are presented examples of how the spirit realm above us peers down upon their unruly students. The process of tracking and modifying behavior on an individual and a collective basis is revealed. Even the broader direction of human society in the future is posted for all to see. God bless.